I'm representing the taxpayers, basically. My whole reason for getting involved in local politics is to make sure that the promises to the community are being kept. It's pretty simple. The top three issues in the race, the absolute top issue, are the detention basins, or is the detention basin at Memorial Park. Memorial Park and the Sorich Creek that runs along Memorial Park represents roughly 3% of the overall flow at peak flood stage in the San Anselmo Creek. So for an event like the 2005 event, it was a trickle in the overall flow. The cost associated with creating a detention basin at Memorial Park is about $17.4 million. This is enough money to repave 3/4 of the streets in San Anselmo. Also, it's enough money to pay off 50% of our unfunded pension obligations. It is an inordinate amount of money. The second issue on the first question is the amount of work that has to take place. It is 8 acres in size, and they're lowering the elevation of this field somewhere between 10 and 12 feet. That is, I'm told, in the neighborhood of 7,000 dump truck loads of soil that they're trying to export from this particular location. They don't know where they're putting that much fill yet, but they're taking it off of this site, all in the name of reducing the flood, that stage of the flood, by about 10%. So we're still 90% flooded. Now, is this really worth all the effort that we're doing? The third thing is, when this plan was unveiled to the community back in July of this year, it was unveiled as preliminary. Don't worry about it. We're going to be fine. We have so much more study to do. Well, this thing has most of its money in place, and it's ready to go, and it feels like a fully baked cake that is being force-fed to the community without, in my view, proper community involvement in the process. This preliminary plan that costs $17.5 million, that involves the exportation of 7,000 dump trucks worth of soil, just seems, for a very trickle of benefit in flood mitigation, seems like an inordinate expense. The second thing that's most important in the town are the roads. I got involved in local government as a member of the Financial Advisory Committee, mostly because I was annoyed at the condition of our roads. I had all sorts of suspicions about where the money was going. So when the Financial Advisory Committee was convened, we had the opportunity to study the budget, find out where our expenses are, where our revenue opportunities were, and I was actually quite delighted to know how tightly run the town was financially. It's really well run, but there's also no money. So we need to address roads. That's number 2. Number 3, the answer to the fact that our roads are dilapidated, our roads and infrastructure are dilapidated, is Measure D. Now, Measure D is a general tax measure. It is being sold to the community as a roads measure, when in fact it is a general tax measure. It can be spent on anything that the council elects. There are members of the community that will be impaneled as an oversight committee, but they have absolutely no teeth. So I felt that if Measure D is to pass, and there are good reasons to pass Measure D, but if it is to pass, you need a councilman who is keenly and just acutely aware of the issues associated with the promises that are being made and how those promises are going to be kept. I will be ruthless. I will always ask the question, can we do more with this money? Are there other things that we can do that are cheaper, that accomplish the same goals? Those are the 3 reasons why that I think are facing the town. The 3 criteria that I would use to make sure that the money, I will always ask that question. I answered this in the previous statement. Mm-hmm. I will always ask, is this the best we can do? Is there another solution that costs less? Is there more that we can do with this money? And is this a priority of the community? Those are the 3 things that I would do. Control of myself at the town council meetings, I could do that. Yeah, I am passionate. I'm absolutely passionate. I won't be a wallflower to anybody, but I certainly can be civil, and that's an easy one. That's the low-hanging fruit. And I think that dissent is absolutely essential in public discourse. If everybody agreed with everybody else, and where would the fun be? How do you know where your boundaries are? It's important to have perspectives on both sides to find the middle and the compromise. Now, neither side gets to win, right? So there are other solutions that haven't been considered. So by having dissent in any organizational body, you work towards better decisions. It's that simple. This is a thankless job, right? It takes a special person to want to serve his community in this capacity. Now, I have a really satisfying work life. I have a perfect marriage, and I like my Tuesday nights the way they are. Does anyone affirmatively want to give up 5 hours of a Tuesday night, most of their weekend studying the issues before the Tuesday night, and sit there and decide the fate of a tree? The issues on both sides of that decision are incredibly compelling. On one hand, you've got private property rights and a tree that is threatening somebody's property and perhaps life. If a branch were to fall and crush the house, it could be a catastrophic thing. Deciding against that exposes the town to tremendous liability. Deciding and therefore deciding for the tree. Deciding to kill the tree. This is a tree that was here before any of us were even on Earth. This is a 300-year-old magnificent organism that makes our community. So you're deciding to kill that. Who wants that? Who wants to make that decision? No, this is not an easy job. You decide for the tree and probably 5 people give you a little nod, good job. You decide for the property owner, and about 5 people give you a nod of good job. You decide for the tree, 100 people hate your guts, and 3 of those want to kill you. And the sickening thing, there's 12,000 other people that are completely unaware that this is even an issue. One of my very core beliefs is that government should be absolutely transparent. Absolutely. That there shouldn't be backroom deals, and that everything needs to be out and open and honestly presented to the voters, and so the voters can make informed decisions. The Brown Act is presently not being enforced by California. They're not funding California used to fund governments for compliance against the Brown Act. Now they don't pay the governments to behave themselves anymore, the local governments to behave themselves anymore. So it's incumbent upon the towns themselves to enforce transparency and the rules of the Brown Act. And San Anselmo has made the decision to do so, and I absolutely support that. Well, ethics are very, very important in life, but certainly in government. The opportunities, I think, for violations of ethics are out there. You've got friends, and you've got constituents and promises that have been made during the political process, and it leads for awkward moments. But a person that is open and honest and transparent to the voters can operate in a very ethical sort of way without compromising his integrity, his word, and most importantly, the trust of the voters. Now, in answer to this particular question, I'm not suggesting that anything is unethical about this, but an example of transparency are these detention basins. If I am all for rehabilitated parks. I want our parks to be rehabilitated. We need good, solid, quality, safe fields that people can play on. Our youth can have their baseball and their soccer leagues and that sort of thing. So if this is a way to get a new park is that we have to dig this enormous hole in the ground, we're not being honest with ourselves. If it's a park that we want, if the park is our priority, and we're just conveniently using grant funding in the name of flood control to get it, we're not being honest and transparent, and we're probably not being ethical with the voters. So if we look at the detention basin at Memorial Park, and we decide that the cost and the expense and the magnitude of this particular project is worth the very slight benefit that it gets because we get fields, I think we're missing a very big picture. And I use as an illustration Red Hill, which is a brand new rehabilitated park. It is slated to be, at some undetermined future date, another detention basin. But because it's a brand new park, it's not on the table as a detention basin right now. So what are we really after? Are we after parks, or are we after detention basins in the name of flood control? I submit that question to the voters. Because if it's parks, let's make that the conversation. Let's not make detention basins and flood control for very slight measures. Believe me, I am absolutely not for flooding. I don't want it to ever flood again. But I want what we do in the name of flood control to actually do something. So, ethics aside, we should be straight with the voters on what we're trying to achieve here. Are we trying to achieve flood control, or are we trying to achieve new parks?